Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for March 16th, 2023. Well, in yesterday's update, I went through the call for an emergency conference from Helga Zepp-LaRouche with the banking crisis in the background, the overall physical economic collapse. She said it's essential that we reverse the policies of the present system, the present neoliberal system, and return to those of the American system. And this caused some confusion among some of you, in fact, in some of you, anger. Are we advocating the American system of today? This is the cause of the crisis, you wrote. Well, you're right. There's understandable hesitation, but it's based on a misunderstanding of what we mean by the American system. In fact, I would say that today's politicians have no conception of the American system of economics and instead have fully embraced the British imperial or neo-imperial, neoliberal approach, which is based on exploitation of cheap labor and cheap raw materials, austerity, wars, colonial wars, and is the exact opposite of the American system. In fact, the American system was fought against the British system. So let me make a few points here to help guide you, because this is going to be the increasing topic of discussion in the weeks ahead, especially once the war in Ukraine is resolved and if we can stop the drive for a war against China. The central question before everyone will be, how do we achieve just economic policies that benefit every nation, every sovereign nation, as opposed to the collapsing system we have today? Now, the British neoliberal system is a monetary system, and it's based on oligarchical control of credit, oligarchical control over spending. And this oligarchy and the corporate cartels control the legislatures of virtually every country in the Northern Hemisphere. Certainly in Western Europe, the United States, Canada is a disaster in this way, as is Australia. So you have to go back to what was the subject of the American Revolution and the US Constitution. It was a break from the British system. But lying historians, and boy, there are plenty of lying historians. You know, I'm a historian. I studied history in graduate school and can tell you that most historians don't have a conception of what the American Revolution was about. They buy the line that the United States adopted the model of the Bank of England, the economic and philosophical approach of John Locke. But in fact, the American system was based on Benjamin Franklin's appreciation of the ideas of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, the German scientist and philosopher, who specifically refuted the philosophical outlook of John Locke. Now, this is best seen in his essay, Society and Economy, where Leibniz said that the key to a successful economy is happiness. Workers who are engaged in productive activity that involves their creative faculties to transform nature for the benefit of human civilization. Now, this is the concept in the Declaration of Independence of pursuit of happiness, comes directly from Leibniz through Franklin and Hamilton. And this idea of happiness is not based on money, but based on a life which provides the capability to improve the standard of living of everyone. And it's a philosophical concept, not life, liberty, and property, but life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, this starts from the standpoint that it's not money, but there's a physical basis for prosperity, and that is the transformation of nature for the benefit of mankind. Now, Lyndon LaRouche advanced this concept dramatically in his use of two particular ideas. One, potential relative population density, which is that the measure of a success of an economy is the improvement of living standards for a growing number of people and a growing population. That is, population growth depends on successful economic policy. And then a second concept, energy flux density, the ability of concentrating the source of energy to increase the power to transform nature And this is seen consecutively from the move from biomass to coal and fossil fuels to nuclear and the future of nuclear fusion. This is what advances the productive power of labor and which requires the creative application of not just scientists and people involved in technology, but an educational process so that every citizen is able to participate in this advance and progress. Now, this is centered around the idea of credit. What is credit? Now, credit is used by the current central banking system to provide liquidity to speculators. And we've seen a shift away from credit to the productive sector. And look, it's fairly obvious. You can make more money in speculation in the short term than you can by building modern steel plants or power plants or infrastructure. But ultimately, the increases of productivity that come from investment in physical economy are what define the future prosperity, whereas speculation creates bubbles which will pop. And in the short term, the oligarchs will grab the lion's share of the wealth while everyone else is left with the bill in the form of unpayable and uncollectible debt, which is what we're facing today with the banking collapse. So the issue of credit was the subject of Alexander Hamilton's, a couple of his important reports as Treasury Secretary to the US Congress, where he emphasized credit for physical production, for manufacturing, for public works, which today we call infrastructure. And to accomplish this, we had a national bank, not a Bank of England central bank controlled by private interests, but one which under the Constitution, currency and credit policy is the domain of the US Congress, that is, elected representatives of the people. Well, that's the key term there. Most people in the Congress don't represent your interests. They represent the interests of the corporate cartels that gave them the money to get elected, that organized the media coverage to elect them, and that is providing the source of wealth for them because many people go into Congress without too much money and end up as millionaires. Now, that means that we don't need, under Hamilton's concept of national banking, the bank serves the interests of the physical production, not the speculators. And the central bank model of the Bank of England was rejected by Hamilton. But historians tell you that Hamilton modeled his national bank on the Bank of England, which is bunk, which is a lie. Now, if you have Congress in a Hamiltonian conception controlling the allocation of credit rather than the Federal Reserve as a private institution controlled by the largest financial cartels, if you have the Congress doing it, then presumably it will orient credit toward those areas of the economy which benefit the whole society, as opposed to the speculator. But the Adam Smith concept of economy is a money concept: buy cheap and sell dear. This is the basis of the International Monetary Fund and the World Economic Forum approach. The idea of anywhere you can get the cheapest labor and the cheapest raw materials, control over raw materials by the cartels, and control the terms of trade through institutions such as the World Trade Organization, then you can control the world economy. That's the British imperial system that has been adopted by the corrupt and idiotic members of the US Congress, who think that as long as there's money sloshing around, this is good economic prosperity. And unfortunately, we saw this with President Trump, who correctly attacked the so-called Obama recovery based on quantitative easing, but then did the same thing, which supposedly was an economic recovery under President Trump. It was not the American system. So the trick that's used to get support to allow the swindles to occur is to define prosperity in monetary terms, GDP, per capita income. But they play on both the greed of people and the fear that you're going to be left with nothing. I'm going to be attaching to the description section a speech by Lyndon LaRouche on the urgency of the American system today, which was from March 2nd, 2006, a speech he gave in Berlin, where he goes through in detail the shift in the United States from a productive manufacturing and scientific agricultural economy to a post-industrial rubbish heap, which we see collapsing in front of us today. In his speech, you'll see the specter of the crash to occur 2 years later in 2008 because of the speculative system. And he talks about what must be done to move from a money system to a system of physical economy. He said the shift that's occurred to the money system, because of that, quote, "we have a doomed culture, a doomed civilization," unquote, if the British system continues to dominate. Now, one of the things we're seeing today is the rejection of many nations of this neo-imperial, neo-colonial system, the so-called revolt of the global South, which is something which is good. This is what the American colonials did in the 1770s and 80s when they made the revolution, which gave us the American system. The approach, the global South is largely countries that have experienced the misery and the degradation of being owned by colonies, by the colonial powers, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Germans, especially the British and the French, who looted countries and now are saying today, stick with us. Don't go with China. Don't go with Russia. Stick with the West. If you don't, you'll be subject to regime change, coups, cut off of credit, and sanctions. Well, the Global South has said we've had enough of that, and that's why they're not supporting the war against Russia, and why many of them are applying for membership in organizations such as the BRICS, turning the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, into the BRICS Plus. So what we're seeing is that the governments in the West, of the European Union, of Canada, the United States, the governments under control of the corporate cartels are committing suicide. And that's what we see with the present banking crisis. It's not just about interest rates. It's about this long-term shift, especially since the murder of John F. Kennedy. And what we have to do now is take power away from these corporate cartels. There are measures to do it. This is LaRouche's idea. And if you read his speech in Berlin, you'll get some real content as to what can be done. Today, this means we have to reject control by companies such as BlackRock and Vanguard and JP Morgan Chase. These 18th and 19th century British methods must be put out of business. And instead, we need a return to the American system. This is going to be a continuing subject for us because it's an important issue, because the policies of today will lead to mass depopulation, either just through incompetence and destruction of the physical economy, or through war. So continue to join us. You may have some questions on this. Feel free to send them to me. Tomorrow will be our Friday question session. Send me your questions at harleysch@gmail.com. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.